Hi, I'm Cailey, a librarian here at Metro Public Library.
And I'm Meg, also a librarian, and welcome to this time's edition of All Booked Up with Cailey and Meg, where each time we give you different book recommendations on a specific theme. This time, we're going to be looking at teen classics.
Yes, and these are a little harder to find because it's really only been the last 50 years or so that books have actually been written specifically for teens. Of course, there were some that were appealing to teens before that, but as an audience that you were writing directly to, it's really only come out in the later half of the 20th century, which is kind of hard to believe because of how big teen fiction can be today.
Yeah, super popular. Now I can't imagine life without those kind of books here at the library. So we're grateful for that genre for sure. And as always, if you don't want to read the physical book, these are available digitally through Hoopla and Libby. So get those apps and you can read these books as well. Cailey, yes. What's your first teen classic?
Okay, so I think we cannot talk about classic teen fiction without talking about the OG, the one that is credited with starting it all, The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton.
Absolutely.
So since it was first published in 1967, The Outsiders has been one of the best-selling YA novels of all time. It is on numerous best of lists, especially when you see those come out from NPR, Rolling Stone, and various ALA lists. And it has just stood the test of time. And for some reason, this book has just gotten to teens throughout generations. It is one of my mom's favorite books. It's one of my favorite books. It's one of my teenage sister's favorite books. It's on everyone's list. So if you have managed not to read this book, let me tell you a little bit about it. In Tulsa, Oklahoma in the 1960s, the town's kids are divided into the greasers and the Socs. Soc is short for social, right. And the greasers are the working class kids, sort of the bad kind of looking kids, I guess. And the Socs are the rich kids. And Ponyboy is our main character, who is 14. He lives with his two older brothers, Derry and Soda Pop.
Love those names.
There are amazing names in this book that just, and Derry is 20 and he's basically taking care of his younger brothers since their parents passed away. And he's the unofficial leader of the greasers. Johnny and Dally are two other teens who are part of this crew. And there's more than meets the eye with these kids from the wrong side of the tracks. They are a little bit rough and tumble, and there are some sort of complex inner dynamics working between the teens. Derry wants Ponyboy to have a better life, and he really wants him to work hard in school. But unfortunately, Ponyboy is, wrapped up in all of this sort of rival gang stuff going on. And he gets embroiled in a battle with the Socs, a rumble with the Socs, that actually results in someone's death. And he and Johnny wind up going into hiding. And while they're there, they're forced to sort of think about how they got here and where they want to go from here and what's next for them. And there's a lot that goes on. This book is very short, but has a surprising amount of depth to it. And Ponyboy is this complicated character who struggles with what's right and wrong, fitting in versus sort of doing what he wants to do and what he knows he should do. He's gone through a lot at a young age, and he's largely forced into this life that he leads. He hasn't really had a lot of choice in the matter. Reading this book, generations of people have come to love these troubled boys. And if you have not read it, you definitely should. And if it's been a long time since you've read it, you should pick it up again. This is one of those books that is taught in schools, and it catches the interest of the kids who even think they don't like it. Oh, and it was a classic 80s movie with a young Patrick Swayze, Matt Dillon, Rob Lowe, Tom Cruise, and other big stars.
Yes, perfect. I love the adaptation as well. But yeah, this is another one I'm also a person. It's on my favorites list as well. I just love this book. And to piggyback off your last point, yeah, it's a great book to read at multiple stages in life, because when I first read it, I think I was younger than these characters, and I read it, in the last few years. And Derry, who, is the oldest brother, now he seems like such a kid, even though he was like the mature one back then. So it's a great one to read. If you haven't read it since you were a teenager, I would definitely recommend reading it as an adult. So that was a great one. The OG. So my teen classic is another one that's assigned a lot in school years, and that's Lord of the Flies by William Golding, another classic. So reading this one in my younger years, this book about a group of stranded schoolboys and the frightening consequences of their autonomy fascinated me, much in the same way Stepford Wives fascinated my mother back in the day. So it's just one of those really creepy books that what I find interesting about it is, like a lot of books that have shocking elements to them, the creepiest part is the element of truth that is attached to the premise. So it's one of those chillingly true-ish kind of books. So it's about a group of boys who, after a plane crash, they're stranded alone on a deserted island, and they don't have any prospects of getting rescued anytime soon. So it's just these, young preteen age boys, no adults, and they kind of have to run life for themselves. So at first, this seems like a great prospect for them, no parents to get in the way, no adults, they can run life how they seem best fit. But as the book progresses and the characters are left to their own devices, there are weird noises in the night, rumors of a dangerous beast, and a little bit of craziness. So it's definitely one of those terrifying books in that sense of what will people do when they're left to their own devices and can choose to do whatever they want to do. And I think that's why it's such a classic that is assigned in schools all the time, because it is such an interesting look at the human condition and how, people interact with each other. So it's a great one that I couldn't recommend enough.
Definitely. And I think it's one of those ones that has inspired countless copycat sort of things with books, especially with the very big trend in dystopian fiction. Yeah. You can absolutely see the influence of Lord of the Flies on a lot of these teen dystopian novels. So if you have a love of those dystopian books and have not read Lord of the Flies, jump on that.
Absolutely. This is a great point. Yeah.
So my next one is called Forever by Judy Blume. And this is another one of those ones that when I think of classic teen fiction, this comes to mind. A lot of people think Judy Blume and think of her children's series, and absolutely great too. But she also wrote a number of memorable teen fiction in the 70s and 80s. And Forever has been controversial book since it was first released in 1975, but it remains a book that is read by teens today. It has been reissued every generation with a more like relevant cover, that kind of thing, but it's still read. And the themes still sort of resonate today. Catherine is a high school senior and meets Michael at a New Year's Eve party. They are instantly attracted to one another and start to date. And through the normal progression of their relationship, the two begin to discuss sex, and he's ready and she's not, and how they get to that point. After dating a little while, they do become safely sexually active, and both are convinced that this is fine because this is a love that is forever. He even gives her a necklace that says so. And a wrench is sort of thrown into their relationship when they have to spend the summer apart. Catherine is going to a camp for the summer, and it's keeping them a little more distant. And as this book does take place pre-cell phone, they are writing letters to one another, but the letters become a little more infrequent, and she doesn't feel like she has as much to share with him. And she also begins to experience feelings for another person, and it makes her question if she is really ready for that forever. So why is this a classic? I think it's because it's a realistic and very relatable story of first love, and teens and adults. We love to read about love. But it also is pretty much the first book to show teens engaging in a sexual relationship without having negative consequences. The author herself said that part of the reason that she wrote this book was because so many of the books of the day showed that teens engaging in sexual activity would be punished in some way. They would end up pregnant, they would die, or otherwise experience negative consequences. And she wanted to show the normal progression of a relationship and that it doesn't always have to have a negative connotation, which coincidentally is also why this book is controversial, because some people do not want teens to think in that manner. And this is one of those books that has appeared on the banned books lists because of the sexual content. And so, I think though it's still one that is appealing, especially when you're talking about teens who are just learning about relationships and things, to show how a natural progression can occur. And it's still relatable just to kind of have those first love letters.
Yeah. And this was one I didn't read like as a teen myself. I didn't read it until, I was a little older. Mm-hmm. And I could really see why it still has even popularity today, because she is candid about these issues that, a lot of teens have questions about. And sometimes it's hard for them to get honesty or honest answers about, these type of things. So I think her candidness and her, just being forthright about the realistic aspects of, dating, as a teenager, mm-hmm. I really admirable, and I could appreciate it. So yeah, she's a great writer anyway, but yeah, I thought that was a cool aspect of it. Well, awesome. So my final teen classic is one, I'm not sure how often it's assigned in school nowadays, but this is one that was a classic for me growing up, no question. And that is The Face on the Milk Carton by Cailey B. Cooney. This is the first. I know, isn't it fun? I was obsessed with this as a kid. It's actually a 5-part series to this, and mm-hmm. It's a mystery series about Janie Johnson. And Janie Johnson is a girl who is a 15-year-old girl. During a random school lunch day, typical day, she grabs her friend's milk carton and sees her face on the missing child. And for people who don't know, because I don't think they do this anymore, in the 80s and 90s, milk cartons that you get at school, like those little milk cartons, would have missing children images on them. So mm-hmm. If you can find this child, let authorities know. So she found her face as a 3-year-old girl on this milk carton, which would be crazy to find. What would you do with that information if you found your face on a milk carton? So she starts to wonder, was I kidnapped as a little kid? So it sends Janie on this, huge mystery to figure out what happened to her as a kid. And it gets especially interesting when she starts to ask her parents these questions and gets very mixed answers from them. She wants to see her birth certificate and they can't give it to her, and various other things just, ring sort of alarm bells in her mind, like what's going on here. So I love this. It's a definite page turner. You're going to want to read the other books in the series after this and figure out what happened to Janie Johnson as a kid. And who are her real parents? So it's a classic mystery, definitely engrossing.
Definitely. And I think it's a good example of a classic teen book, because it definitely gets that sort of series started, but it really gets you hooked. You have to find out what happens. And I remember there was a movie too, as well, because I remember watching that at some point. Yeah. And I think it might have even been a made-for-TV movie, but
right. It's always great.
Yes. So, check out these classic teen novels, whether you're a teen or, young at heart.
All right. Great job, guys. Have a good week and happy reading.